Well, hello, community, creatives, and kind folks out there. This is RPG with DBJ. This is yet another episode of The Verbal Component. And today we're going to talk about bondage and all of its iterations. Yes, this will be a short video. I hope this elicits some kind of creative thought out there. All right, so recently, we've been talking about, like I brought up, like using pets and mounts in your setting, your world creation, and how that can, make cultures a little bit different. And then the other day we talked about faith and belief and religion, and using clerical abilities in your, medieval role playing, your Dungeons and Dragons. And today I just want to talk about bondage uh, in the cultural sense, meaning people who are stuck in a dogma, a type of thought that they cannot escape. And also the idea of a physical bondage. And I don't mean just ropes and chains, but um, the physical act of overcoming your surroundings, whether it's through survival or travel or those kind of things. So let's talk about the cultural bondage for a moment here. One of the great things about role playing games and a number of videos that I've put out recently has to do with challenging the norm, breaking away from the norm. And that's always a cool thing, right? When we make characters, we want to be different. We want to be that special snowflake that's different than everybody else. One of the most famous Dungeons and Dragons characters, Dritz Duerden, the drow elf who rebels against his, entire evil culture, and it becomes this good guy. And we all want to be that person that can stand up, and fight against the norm, to take down evil. So I believe it behooves you to, if you're creating a setting or even creating a player character, to want to create a character that wants to kind of buck the system in many ways. Now, there's a danger in that because some people are rebels without a cause. I mean, over my shoulder, there's a James Dean, there's a movie called Rebel Without a Cause. And what can happen there is someone wants to create a character and they want to rebel, but they don't have a purpose in doing it other than disrupting the game or the people around them. So in many ways, creating a character that's part of an endemic system, a part of a system that this is the way things are, this is the way we all think, whether it's a religion or a political system or 5,000-year tradition, and then playing that character and then going against it. It's the classic elves and dwarves and elves hate each other. But once they encounter each other and they're in the same group, they realize, wait a minute, they're actually just like me. I mean, they may look a little bit different, but they're just like me. And there becomes that begrudging respect with each other. Of course, thinking of Lord of the Rings and how, I'll never, the first movie, Fellowship of the Ring, I'm not going anywhere with that elf, and then of course the elf is like, well, you stupid dwarves and stuff. And then they realize, well, wait a minute, the Hobbit dude's about to go ahead. I'm not going to be upstaged by this other guy. And then they become begrudging friends, or at least really close allies. So that's one thing to when world creating, to create systems that some people will actively want to fight against. Recently I've just been doing a rewatch and re-listen of Game of Thrones, leading up to the final season. And there's many parts in the Game of Thrones where, as an outsider, we look at it like, why would you even be involved in something like that? Like, why would you hold these cultures so close to the vest? And it gives people an identity. Everyone wants an identity, and everyone wants to belong to, whether it's an organization or a faction or a government. People want to belong. They want to feel like their actions mean something. And when you have intelligent creatures, NPCs or monsters or something in your world, giving them something to believe in, even if from the outside, it doesn't make sense. As long as it is internally consistent, I think it really means something. You can have evil minions that are following the evil lich because at that moment it makes a lot of sense for them, but over time you find out, or it may be revealed, the PCs may reveal to them that what you're doing is wrong, and so they could become begrudging allies, or at least not enemies any longer, and so that you could solve a problem without, of course, having to kill everything, solve it that way. But now let's talk about some physical bondage. Nerdarchy recently did a video. Those guys did a video about, are utility spells ruining the role-playing experience? Are they ruining Dungeons and Dragons? A description would be utility spells like create food and water, spells that allow you to instantly find things, spells that allow you to search for things instantly. Most of the healing spells, most of the spells that remove conditions, lesser restoration. Basically, instead of having to find a tent and shelter, you have Leomund's tiny hut instead of finding things. And so one of the things that I feel when it comes to that is, it's not necessarily that those spell and those abilities in Dungeons and Dragons are ruining the game. I believe it's the idea of not looking past them and overcoming the obstacles that happen when you don't have access to them. For example, in a post-apocalyptic world, we wouldn't be used to not having electricity or heat or television or communication or a safe place to go and sleep. It's overcoming the loss of those resources. And so I feel like having those resources is cool, but then challenging when those resources are not available. Now, in one of the comments below in that video, Mike Gould pointed out, like, sometimes you really need to read the spells. And this is where, like, my I don't know, somewhat addiction to being the self-appointed third pillarist and using exploration, that third pillar of gaming, to me, it really comes into play, right? Because he even mentions, sometimes you need to really read a spell. Does the spell say that you must target a creature you can see? Then if you can't see them, then you can't do it. The components, the verbal, the somatic, the material components, challenging those effects, even just generally creating a setting where certain things aren't possible. You go into the cursed mountains or something, and your light spells don't work because there's a pervading darkness. Now, I understand that there are many players who would balk at that idea. They balk at the idea of having any kind of limitation at all. And I would say to you, well, yes, I understand role-playing games allow you to escape the hazards, the drawbacks of humanity. But I would also say, then where's the struggle? What things are holding you back that you are struggling against? What are you trying to overcome? What are your goals? Maybe the word bondage isn't correct, but there must be something that you would like to explore to overcome. And yes, sure, it could be, I want to draw my sword and hack the creature to death and have the creature hack me to death. But at some point, without throwing something in there to make it unique, it becomes a slog. It becomes the same thing. There's only so many. I brought up the idea of spectacle creep at one time. There's only so many minotaurs you can throw at the party until, okay, there's one minotaur, now there's 15, and now there's 35. What can we do to make things different? Hey, how about having a fight in a tornado, or in a snowstorm or sandstorm, or a torrential rain, or on a muddy hill, or on the edge of a cliff or something, in pitch blackness or whatever, doing things that are like fighting on a rope bridge, fighting on top of a rooftop or an abandoned building that's on fire, fighting down in the sewer systems, fighting on a storm-tossed ship, like just doing things that, without needing to increase the number of enemies, but still allow some type of challenges, and having challenges to player character capabilities, so have to think outside the box. Sure, your your hyper focused archer may be extremely effective, on the castle walls. But then when you're in a torrential rainstorm and the winds are blowing and your arrows are not hitting their mark because you've got disadvantage, or you can only fire an arrow 30 feet, and any further than that, the wind's going to snatch them away. Dealing with those obstacles temporarily is a thing. And I know I've had a number of people comment on videos when I talk about, using the third pillar as that kind of, according to this video, as a kind of bondage, as a way to escape from this particular hazard. There's people like, oh, well, that's just gonna suck. That's not right. And I'm thinking, well, thinking outside the box, maybe that's the issue. It's not challenging oneself to say, okay, here's a hazard. Here is a thing that is preventing me from doing something. How do I escape it? How do I get around it? How do I use it to my advantage? How do I survive it until it goes away? Unless you're playing in a role-playing game where there's a torrential rainstorm all the time, indoors, outdoors, and for the next 18 months, in your gaming time schedule, it's going to stop raining at some point. You can fire an arrow inside of a place. You can go under a cave opening. You could rely on your other player characters to allow them to have the spotlight as well. Sometimes having your limitations on you, having a limitation on the wizard, because there is I don't know, the ancient crypt is emitting a horrific sound that is disrupting the spellcaster's abilities. Having the other players have to step up and have the fighter and the ranger go, okay, well, if we can, find what's creating that horrible sound, maybe the wizard can, come back to his power and prominence. Then that allows someone else to take the spotlight. So it's not all about you. It's not always you. It is a collaborative game. And to allow another player who's maybe not so much able to shine in some of those moments, maybe in that torrential rainstorm, that fighter is now protecting the archer and striking down the enemies in close combat, because it's very difficult to strike them very far away, and vice versa, right? There may be a situation where can't strike the flying creature with my sword, but those people can fire things from long range. Maybe they can take it out, knock it to the ground, and then go after it. All right, so let's bring it around, summarize it back, just talking about the idea of being able to struggle against things. Lastly would be, and this is a little bit more ephemeral, is escaping the bondage of our own thoughts and feelings. Many times sometimes we don't know ourselves enough. And by learning who we are and what we are, we can challenge those notions, learn a little bit about ourselves, and then enjoy the games. Sometimes I feel like, making these videos and doing things, like there are people out there who are looking. We live in a culture now where people want to be triggered by things. They're looking for something to be upset about. They're looking for things to go, aha, you just offended me, and I'm going to blast you now. I'm going to start a flame war. And sometimes just because we hold something dear in real life doesn't mean that we can't challenge those notions in role-playing games. And so therefore, I understand we should, in many ways, just accept people for who they are and what they are, and add those things into role-playing games. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong to include them. So, for example, I would very much throw slavery into my role-playing setting. It's not because I like slavery or that I have some special perspective on it or something, but it is something that can be explored and then ultimately overthrown. Remember, I mentioned in this video that it's the idea of the PCs challenging the notion that this isn't right, that they're fighting against something. So without having those things to fight against, then what's the point? And so, creating a world where we have political systems or religious dogma or even traditions that in our modern day we might hold dear, to challenge the notion that in this particular game setting, there's something wrong with it, to throw in the fact that there is something there's something rotten to the core. Just again, think just for some reason, just me going back across, the world of Westeros and the Game of Thrones. I know everyone isn't a fan of it, but there's excellent writing because at no point is there's no clear good guys, because there's something rotten about just about everyone's path of least resistance, that there's something in their background that made them make decisions that make these horrible experiences propagate even further horrible experiences. And I think that's just a great thing to delve into. So anyway, I'm RPG with DBJ. Here's my kitty Sophie in the background. Please check out anything down in the doobly-doo. I'm a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. Yes, I'm still writing things even when I'm not making videos. And so look down below, go to Drive Through RPG. We have our recent release known as the Adventure Keys Archive #1. They are 10 3 to 4 page adventures. Each one of those adventure or encounters have options in them, at least 3 options per. So we have like threats and changes and obstacles and hooks and goals and things, so that they can be used over and over again. And there's an unreleased adventure key within it called the Twisted Stairs. So it's combined together. Right now, it sits at $2.50 for all 10 of them together for the holiday season. And you can get it print on demand for $9.95 and then get both of them for $10.95. There's other crazy things. Just go to Drive Through RPG, check out what Critical Hit Publishing has released. And of course, check out my baby, my favorite, the cinematic environments. That's my brainchild there. Just all talking about all things Third Pillar, just giving you real, throwing in the environment, whether it's like battles or adventure or discovery, and using those things. All talking about the storm-tossed ships and drowning and cold and heat and mountains and winds and all those kind of things, natural environments, and for volcanic environments, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, got rules for that, and so bring it to the table, have your players decide whether they want to use it for themselves, and have a good time. So anyway, guys, have a very good day, morning, afternoon, evening. I will see you tomorrow, hopefully.